Hello again, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Preseason Reports here on the Evolution Network. I am your host, as always, the love child of Ben Stein and MTV's Daria, Mr. Joseph Potter, and joining me today is the incomparable CEO of Draft Utopia, Mr. Chris Ransom.
Thanks for having me on, Joseph. And this is going to be a fun show because Josh Rosen is such a controversial prospect. On one end, you can make a case he's the top prospect on the draft, and on another end, you can make a case that he shouldn't even belong until the late first round. It's sort of in the Brady Quinn range or the range where Paxton Lynch got picked. So that's what makes this prospect so intriguing. And I found a scouting report with the 20 things where they mentioned 20 different things: pocket presence, escapability, arm strength. And I'm trying to figure out what's true and what's not true. Because, I mean, it's too early to determine all this stuff, but some of this has to be smoke screens and some of it has to be legitimate.
Yeah, and with Josh Rosen, a lot of it is legitimate, yet there are some very glaring flaws in his game, and this is something that I said on our last preseason profiles with Josh Allen. These two are very similar prospects, and that's something a lot of people aren't bringing up. The Wyoming and UCLA prospects at quarterback could potentially become the top two quarterbacks in this class. And for Josh Rosen, his pros are staggeringly good. He has very good footwork, very good deep touch, mobility, vision, throwing motion, and poise. These are all very important pieces to the quarterback puzzle. And we'll go over some of them here, and we'll get your take on them. The footwork, for instance, he has a very nice 3, 5, and 7 step drop. He has a nice short step when it comes to stepping into the throw. He doesn't get off balance a lot. He has a very nice deep touch. He can put touch on the ball. He can get it right over the shoulder. Usually has no issues with the receivers being able to get their hands on the ball. He looks off his receivers, makes 2-3 reads per makes 3 reads per throw on average. And let's reiterate, I did watch the Texas A&M game and the Stanford game, so he was under plenty of pressure. They're the number 1 and 3 picks in the 2017 draft, bearing down on him. He was under a good bit of duress during this game, or during these two games. His mobility, he's able to get out of the pocket. He's able to step up in the pocket. He's got good throwing motion. If he didn't tap the ball, he'd probably have the quickest throwing motion in this draft. But with the tap of the ball, as anybody who knows quarterbacking knows, you tap the ball, you're wasting time. So that's an issue. And he's always calm in the pocket. He doesn't have the pocket awareness that Josh Allen has, but at the same time, he's very calm, and he seems to have pretty good awareness, good enough to get away from the big pass rushers, or maybe he just doesn't want to get flattened. Either way, I mean, you can take it or leave it at that point. But he also has some issues, things that we were talking about here earlier and have been talking about with him for the last few weeks. Other than the aforementioned tapping the ball, he also holds the ball too long. And he has a tendency to throw off his back foot quite a bit. When he steps into the ball, like I said, he has a nice short step, gets power behind it, does well. Tends to be off balance a little bit. Throws off his back foot a little bit too much. several times a game. While he's calm in the pocket, he tends to go ahead and he tends to try to rely on his arm strength too much. And that's a problem because he doesn't have an overpowering arm. So relying on your arm strength is going to become an issue. So he really needs to work on not relying on his physical skills in that regard. Then, finally, his decision making. Same problem we had with Josh Allen, only not to the same extreme. Tends to make some poor decisions. Sees an open guy, doesn't take what the defense gives him on an average basis. This leads to issues with a lot of his throws. And case in point, when looking back at the Rose Bowl game on ESPN, he had a little bit of trouble. He had some trouble, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Forced the ball. Can't be forcing the ball. He got sacked quite a bit. He had in the box score, he had 8 rushing attempts for negative 18 yards. Yes, he had 1 12-yard gain, which made sure it wasn't pathetically awful. Then he was only 26 for 46 passing, 56%, a touchdown, and the aforementioned interceptions. So Rosen has his strong points. He also has his weak points. That was his only multi-interception game of the year against Texas A&M. Against Stanford, the other game I watched, he only had 1 touchdown, but he had no interceptions and threw for a high percentage, 18 for 27, threw for 248 yards. So, and the one problem I have with his rushing, even though he's athletic, when he tries to run too much, he comes into trouble. Say he had games of negative 18 yards, negative 8 yards, negative 19 yards, and his first game back last season against Arizona State, he was negative 31 yards rushing on 4 attempts. So he does have his issues. Yeah.
Yes, he does. And issue number 2 is escapability. Took several sacks, in some cases walked right into them. Is that an example of what Rosen did with the negative yards?
Yes, it's a very good example with what he did with negative yards. Yeah, he can have the poise, all the poise in the pocket in the world, but even if you're mobile, you have the poise, you have to have that awareness as to what's bearing down on you. And that's something that Rosen doesn't seem to have an abundance of. He's got it decently, but he always seems to be too focused on what's happening in front of him and not focused enough about what's around him.
I can agree with that to an extent. I feel like Rosen is awful against Texas A&M, but he did well in the other games. And some of the good things with him are velocity. Sometimes he threw with just enough velocity, but not hard enough to force drops. And maybe he doesn't have the best arm, but he has the velocity to manipulate his passes. But there's other things in his game he needs to work on.
Yeah, and that goes to that short step that I was telling you about. He has extremely good mechanics overall. If he can stop throwing off his back foot and get that velocity that you talked about more often, because you have to remember, he had, against Arizona State, he was 55% passing, almost 56% passing. Against Arizona State, he was 54% passing. Against Texas A&M, he was 56% passing. A lot of those incompletions, 24 for 43, 20 for 37, 23 for 38, 26 for 46, came because he was throwing off his back foot. When he stepped into it, his throws were crisp, they were on target, they were on point. So The only problem he has mechanically is when he does throw off his back foot, when he tends to rely on his arm strength, and he doesn't make the best decisions. I saw some passes, he was trying to make something out of nothing, where he should have taken a sack. He was throwing the ball. Now, this get him into trouble, and this will get him into trouble quite a bit. He needs to learn when to take the sack, when to throw the ball, and how to be more aware of his surroundings. Those are some of the bigger flaws in his game at current.
Yeah, you're right. Those are some of the bigger flaws. And when it came to mechanics on this scouting report that Chris sent me last night, did not utilize the pump when throwing the deep ball. They did not utilize the pump. Was that something you noticed with Rosen, or is that just
Well,
is that a weakness in his game?
well, the pump fake is good for a lot of different things, but what people tend to forget that is that at the college level, it's not as much of a necessity because a lot of these passes are predetermined before he ever gets into the huddle. These plays, as were said by Patrick Mahomes, which the media jumped on, is they're a lot different. They're made for simplicity at the college game. Well, he does need to utilize it more. I will say that because just because you're good doesn't mean you're going to be able to launch the thing in there. But what he needs to start manipulating the defense a little more. And that's something that's going to be a big piece of his game this year. He's going to have to start refining. He and Josh Allen are the two guys I'm looking at to be the top two quarterbacks in this class. But Rosen needs to, even little things, like read off the defense a little better. You can make all the reads, but, just, you're going over the middle. Just give a little show to the right. And a lot of that comes back to patting the ball. It's like, if you tap the ball, it doesn't matter if you pump or not. They're going to know you're not going to throw it because you didn't tap the ball. Stop tapping the ball. That is not only taking time off your pass, but it's a show. That these coaches are going to point out, hey, before he throws the ball, he's going to tap it. So, stop tapping the ball.
Yeah, tapping the ball can delay the release, the mechanics, a lot of other things with the football, and he's got the ideal height. Pro-style offense took snaps under center, did not use audibles, did not go through progressions, used motions to identify coverage, elite on play-action plays. So there's some good and some bad there with him understanding the pro-style offense because a lot of quarterbacks, some of the quarterbacks that run spread offenses actually they actually are allowed to use audibles. I think Mahomes was allowed to use audibles at Texas Tech. Rosen did not use audibles. He operated Jim Mora's system to its fullest, but at the same time, he didn't play up. So he didn't maximize his potential because while it's great that he can use motions to identify coverage and dissect some of the body language of the defense, you also need to be able to read the progressions and figure out who your 1, 2, 3, 4 is when you look at the play.
Yeah, and I know a lot of plays he went 1, 2, 3. He rarely ever went to 4. But he is going into his junior year. So going 3 reads as a sophomore, not really bad. But he needs to take that extra step. He needs to start going 4 reads. He needs to stop tapping the ball. He needs to stop throwing off his back foot. It's time he brings all this together. Because
I think Rosen can be a great quarterback, but I'm not sure if he's going to be a guy like Peyton or Brady that picks up the playbook and just grasps it. I feel like he's going to be more along the lines of a Stafford or a guy that goes at a medium, or a Winston who goes at a medium pace but gradually gets better each year. A guy who probably learns that fourth progression this year as a rookie, then the fifth progression in the second year, and then the sixth progression in the third year. But he gets it. But he gets it at an average pace rather than an advanced pace like a Luck, like a Manning, like a Brady. That's sort of what I'm thinking in terms of football IQ we're going to get with Rosen. Too early to say, but that's sort of what I believe we're probably going to end up getting with Rosen.
Well, when it comes to football IQ, I wouldn't put him in a category with Jameis Winston. Remember, Jameis Winston is a virtual genius. 4.0 GPA. He's a master on the chalkboard. He can read defenses like nobody's business. He is the first quarterback in years, for his first 2 years, to throw for over 4,000 yards. His ability to learn defenses as opposed to just learn the playbook. Anybody can learn playbooks and such. Well, unless you're Jared Goff, I guess. But anybody can learn the playbook for the most part because it's written. It's something like that. And you go out there and do it. Sometimes, some people, they may bring you up at a slower pace, depending on what coach it is for some reason, and then they may open up the playbook more later. But that's based on player. With Josh Rosen right now, I see him more as, I guess, mentally, you can look at him more as from what little I've read of him now, I'd say Deshaun Kaiser. Kaiser was mentally ready, and his mechanics came along this last year where he put all his mechanics together. So I'm looking as a junior for Rosen to put all of his mechanics together. Kaiser got a bad rap because Notre Dame didn't do as well this year with their with their record. And let's face it, last year in games that Rosen played in, they were only 3-3. So if Rosen can put together a junior year like Kaiser's sophomore year, it'll basically be those two just flipping when it comes to, and you could potentially have Rosen being in the same position that Kaiser was thought of as being the number one quarterback for quite a while. So if you have Rosen in the same position as Kaiser was last year, I think you've got a quarterback that's in pretty good position. I would like for Rosen, on top of what we talked about, to get an extra 5 pounds of muscle, because at 218, I would like for him to be at least 220. 223 to 225 would be more ideal to go on his 6'4" frame.
That's an interesting point as well, because under height and weight on this report, it says 6'4", 220, good height, a bit undersized for weight. I think you agree with that completely, even if it's not on the 220 range.
Yeah, it's
undersized for weight.
Yeah, for his body structure, 6'4", I would like to see at least 225 on him, because 218, he's gonna be hit, and it's like last year. You have to remember, last year he missed the first 6 games of the season, so he really does need to put a little bit of weight on to be able to take these hits.
Yeah, he missed the final 6 games of the season, but they're saying under the injury issues that the injury level is severe. And I'm not sure if that's completely correct, because you're looking at a guy who played his entire season as a freshman, and then he played the first 6 games, got injured, did not play again, and or character concerns with him, but I'm not buying it. Not stuff. Multiple reports of this. Not poised under pressure. Does not come off as a strong leader. Team did better without him than with. Exact opposite of clutch in the final 45 seconds of the Texas A&M game. He had 2 fumbles before throwing an interception right to the defender with no receiver in the area. So I'm not sure how severe the character is or how minor it is, because I feel like that the character at this point with Rosen is a two-sided coin. It could be so minor that people don't even realize how little these issues are, or it can be so big that it eventually knocks him down for the first round, depending on what he does this season. Character with Rosen feels like a two-sided coin at this point.
Right now, I'm not worried about Rosen's character. He doesn't have a criminal record. He hasn't done anything to get himself suspended. He hasn't really. I mean, he's a college kid. I mean, he's gonna do some stupid things. But as long as he can keep his attitude in check when it comes to being on the football field and not getting in a lot of trouble, then I'm not too concerned about it. I'm more, when it comes to being a college kid, it's like you're gonna do things that people look at and are gonna be like, what were you thinking? All college kids do it. I did it. I don't think you had the gumption, but you probably would have done it if you did. You're going to do things that a lot of people are going to look at you stupid for. They're going to look at you like, what were you thinking? They're going to say, why were you at that party? What was the point of you doing this? But in the end, they're going to look at, he hasn't committed any crimes. He's a good teammate. He's a team captain. He's at all the meetings on time. He's at all the practices on time. He works hard. He improved on his 33 touchdowns, 16 interceptions for his career. He was better. He got, let's just say, 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio instead of 2-to-1. So he improved on that. He improved on his mechanics. He worked hard. Those are the things they're going to look at. They're not going to look at, this guy did stupid things that stupid college kids do. Wow. They're not going to look at that. If that was the case, I wouldn't have been able to get a job at Walmart. They're not going to look at that. So, that stuff, wait until something comes out, character concerns, that are actually concerning.
Yeah, it's more of a smokescreen than anything else. I sort of agree, but I can see how it would be a two-sided coin. But multiple people are saying the same thing. But it's not an issue right now. I'm with you there. Hits receivers in strides, leads receivers, and bonus X for consistent failures, throwing behind receivers on multiple occasions. Does Rosen underthrow receivers, or do you think that's being a little bit blown out of proportion?
At times he does, and a lot of that comes back to he throwing off his back foot. When he throws off his back foot, he does throw behind receivers a little bit. He does underthrow receivers a little bit. He does overthrow receivers a little bit. But when he steps into it, that's when he looks like the number 1 overall draft pick. That's what you have to really look at. He's got to stop throwing off his back foot and holding the ball as long as he does. And those two things in themselves will clear up about 50% of his it'll clear up 100% of his inaccuracy and about 50% of what's wrong with his throwing. So he's got to hit on those two things.
Yeah, I put true when throwing behind his back foot, because I don't really think you can say that's true or false, because there are throws where he hits his receiver in stride, but then there's other throws, like you said, where he doesn't use his back foot, doesn't really apply everything. And that's part of what you said with the mechanics, the back foot. So downfield vision, found it open first on 2 occasions, threw into double coverage downfield on 3 when downfield his first. What went downfield was his first and only read. I'm not sure how accurate that statement is.
Well, a lot of times when you're throwing downfield like that, you have to, when you throw downfield, a lot of times you don't throw downfield simply to get a completion. If you get a completion, great. A lot of times when you throw down the field, especially on an extremely long pass, you're doing it to stretch the field. You're doing it to show that defense, hey, we can go deep. We're not just going to let you sit there and take away the short stuff. Hey, I got a completion 20 yards. You know what? I'm going to do it to you again. Or, hey, you want to come up on me? We're going to throw it deep. Did I get it completed? No. Did you intercept it? No. But now you know you can't come up here and take away that underneath. So now I've got tight ends coming underneath. Now I got the underneath route ready to go. Now I can do the double moves. I can do the flag and go or something of that nature. You know, the slant and go. You know, the deep slant. I mean, they can do different things now, and those things will be, the deep slant will be covered. But, oh, look at this. You got a 10-yard crossing route or a 10-yard out that crosses over where that outside receiver just was on that 15-yard slant. So that opens up a lot of stuff. So when it comes to deep routes, you really have to take into context as to what they were doing, the timing of it, and such. You can't just say, oh, he threw into double coverage. Well, yeah, he may have overthrown double coverage, on purpose, because he was trying to open up that side of the field on the intermediate stuff. So you really have to take that one into context as to when he was throwing over, when he was throwing deep and when he wasn't.
Yeah, I've circled I've entered true or false on 14 of the first 15 categories. The ninth category was anticipation and timing, and they said that he threw after the route on curls or basic plays was developed. And this is another thing Rosen needs to correct.
Well,
that or not?
Well, we already covered that with holds the ball too long. I mean, that's basically what he does. Oh, he waited to throw the ball. Yeah, he was holding the ball too long, and he ended up throwing the ball late. So we already covered that.
Yeah, and check down, they said he relied too much on his check down, kind of like a Matt Castle type quarterback. Do you buy that with Rosen?
No, he's much better than Castle. Yeah, he threw the ball deep quite a bit, and intermediate and deep. So
Intermediate and deep passes.
Yeah.
With his tape against Stanford, and some of those throws were delivered with great accuracy. But another thing people aren't looking at with Rosen is he lost 3 of his offensive linemen in the 2016 draft. Joe Berger, Caleb Benovich, the right tackle and the right guard. So the right side of his offensive line and his center all left after 2016. And now he's losing Connor McDermott and Quisenberry, the left guard, who converted to center. So all the offensive linemen from his freshman year who helped him when he had his best year are in the NFL. So now Rosen's either going to make it by correcting these issues and carrying UCLA, or he's going to be exposed. There's no other way around it, because this is a junior year. This is a year for him to step up.
Well, you could say last year he was exposed because he had, in 2015, he took 15 sacks. Last year, in half the games, he took 5. He took 13. So, I mean, he was only 2 sacks down. So, last year was a learning experience. And a correction from my earlier statement, I said it was UCLA, Texas A&M in the Rose Bowl. That Texas A&M game was on 9-3. I'm looking at the stats on ESPN, and for some reason it has Rose Bowl right up beside Texas A&M and UCLA.
He struggled at Kyle Field, but they play Texas A&M again this year in the Rose Bowl at UCLA. You don't have to deal with Myles Garrett. You don't have to deal with Deshaun Hall. You don't have to deal with Justin Evans, but you still have to deal with Galen Mack, the defensive tackle, and then you got Armani Watt. Those 2 guys on Texas A&M's defense came back to school. So, and Texas A&M has some corners that are developing as well. So Rosen's going to be tested, but if he beats Texas A&M by 2 touchdowns on his home turf, people might look past the flaws and concerns if he corrects a lot of these issues and he shows up.
Yes, and that Texas A&M game will be huge when it comes to showing up. And that is basically the gist of Josh Rosen, is that these issues, we're going to find out a lot about him in the Texas A&M game, what he has corrected this offseason, and how he goes about it. So if you like this video, if you like this stream, subscribe, share us, let everybody know we're out there. I hope you enjoyed today's
network on YouTube, folks.
Yeah, and right here on the Evolution Network, I hope you enjoyed our player profile on Josh Rosen, and join us again here on the Evolution Network for our next stream. I will have that announced here in the upcoming days. We'll be doing some more quarterback work, and we're also doing some work on a couple of defensive backs for next year. So for Chris Ransom, I'm Joseph Potter. Have a good night.